to everybody. Welcome to all of you to the 7th edition of the Aula Mediterrània opening session. I would like to thank the IBE, the Institut-Barcelona Studies Internationals, that organizes this session with us. As you probably already know, Aula Mediterrània is a program built with different universities, with diverse disciplines, with the aim to push ahead the strengthening and research on Mediterranean region, especially among young researchers. To this end, the European Institute of the Mediterranean draws up Aula Mediterranean's program in a narrow collaboration and in synergy with more than 10 master programs in Barcelona in annual basis. These master's programs are specialized on studies on Arab world, the Euro-Mediterranean affairs, and the Middle and East and North African regions. With them, the IEMed organizes the three components of Aula Mediterrània. This cycle of conference, 24 only in this cycle, the annual academic seminar, and from the last year, the Aula Mediterrània Best Dissertation Awards. The cycle of conference, as the previous one, will be devoted to analyze some of the key issues of the region, such as economic integration, climate change, migration policies, gender, democratization, good governance, or radicalization. In this framework, we devote the opening session, taking advantage of the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona process, about to give a new impetus to the Euro-Mediterranean relations. The Euro-Mediterranean partnership, as you probably know, is very relevant for this institute, for our institute. Not only because 25 years ago, we organized the first civil society forum in the margins of the ministerial meeting, with more than 1,000 participants from the whole Mediterranean space, but above all, because we share the same values and principles, we share, in fact, the same vision, which is to build a space of peace and stability, shared prosperity and dialogue between cultures and civilizations in both shores of the Mediterranean. But now, the important thing is what we should do in the near future. It's obvious that with the pandemic, all our Mediterranean societies are suffering the inequalities, and they are increasing. And also it's true that the global value chains are shrinking, and that provides a new centrality to the Mediterranean. More and more, the Mediterranean becomes the bridge between sub-Saharan Africa and Europe. Also, the climate change is a common endeavor in both shores. But now we have a common instrument to work together, the 2030 agenda, the SDGs, and we have to exploit it. Also, we have a new commission with the Green Deal, the digital age, and the committee and the economy on the top of its priorities. Spain and other member states are taking advantage of this anniversary to impulse the reshape of the partnership priorities between Southern Mediterranean neighborhood countries and the EU. And there is an unexploited new potential with the new multi-annual financial framework, 21-27, and the new financial instrument, the NDICI. To discuss about all these issues and many more, we have the honor today to have with us Jacint Jordana, Professor of Political Science and Public Administration at the Pompeu Fabra University and Director of IBE, who will chair the session, and Alfonso Lucini, Ambassador on a Special Mission for Middle East and Mediterranean Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation. Thank you, Ambassador, for accepting our invitation. After Mr. Lucini's speech, there is foreseen a question and answers slot. You can send the question through the Zoom and YouTube channels, and we convey all of them to Mr. Jordana, who will ask the questions directly to Ambassador Lucini. Thank you very much. Yassine, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Well, I think first, let me say first that this initiative of this Aula Mediterrània is really very enjoyable. We are very interested and we like very much to participate in the initiative because it's putting together all universities in Barcelona, a number of masters, and trying to do something bigger that we can do each master or each institute separately. So I want to congratulate you and thank you for your initiative that, as you said, is this year the seventh year you are organizing this and has been a growing success. No? And I wish you will continue and will reinforce that initiative. We at eBay, we are also committed with Mediterranean issues. And in this sense, we have recently, last year, launched a new pathway. The only area studies pathway we have at eBay in the context of the Masters of International Relations. And we are very proud to increase our number of courses and activities related to the Mediterranean studies, because we think that, of course, we are in the Mediterranean, in Barcelona, we are very committed with all the problems we are having, all the inequalities and the political difficulties, and we want to add our 2 cents to these problems and to the looking for solutions and training people to be involved in these developments. So in this sense, thank you for organizing this. And now, well, let me introduce Mr. Alfonso Lucini. It's my pleasure to introduce him because he's, I think, is very appropriate person for opening this series of lectures and conference we are going to have this year about the Euro-Mediterranean relations 25 years after the Barcelona process. He is now the ambassador in a special mission for Middle East and Mediterranean affairs in the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So he's the person, the key person for whatever is going to happen and the role of Spain in the new developments in the next month, next years, and the new initiative, and he's going to tell us about that. But also he has a long experience. He is ambassador, has been ambassador in Rome, in Athens, also has been many years living in Damascus. He knows very well also the Middle East region, has been involved in previous initiative, also together former Minister Moratinos, and as I said, he's now in charge of this policy at the Spanish ministers. Thank you very much, Mr. Alfonso Lucini, being with us, and well, we look forward for your talk. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening to all. Let me start by thanking the organizers for inviting me to open this series of important lectures. Even if it is not face-to-face and not in Barcelona, it's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to share some reflections on the Mediterranean with people who know about these issues and who are really interested in Mediterranean affairs. November 27th and 28th this year, 2020, will mark the 25th anniversary of an extraordinary event, the Barcelona EuroMediterranean Conference, which launched the so-called Barcelona process. An extraordinary event for several reasons, because of its outcome, because of the actors involved in it, and because of the circumstances that made it possible back in 1995. The outcome of the conference, as is well known, was a consensual declaration and a work program aiming at making the Mediterranean an area of peace and stability, shared prosperity, and cultural and human exchange. Extraordinary also because of the actors involved. All the then members of the European Union, plus the southern partners, including Israel, the Palestinians, other Mediterranean Arabs, and Turkey. And extraordinary also because of the special circumstances that made it possible. Edouard Soler has summarized those circumstances in a very interesting article on the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona conference, published some months ago by CIDO. These circumstances were the end of the Cold War, which introduced a new era in international relations, a renewed confidence in multilateralism after all those years of Cold War, the prospect for peace in the Middle East after the Madrid conference in '91 and the signing of the Oslo Agreement in '93. There was also a new at that time, European will to become an actor in the international scene. It was the time when the common foreign and security policy was starting to take shape. And last but not least, the insistence of the southern European countries, particularly, not only, but particularly Spain at that time, on the need to balance the future enlargement to the east, which was already on the table, with more attention to and more resources for the Mediterranean neighborhood. The sad truth is that 25 years after, and despite the institutionalization of the Barcelona process under the umbrella of the Union for the Mediterranean in 2008, the hopes raised in '95 have been dashed as circumstances in and around the Mediterranean have profoundly changed, and not precisely for the better. Which are the prevailing circumstances in our common sea these days? On the one hand, we have the persistence of two open conflicts in Libya and Syria, with different root causes and characteristics, but having in common the levels of violence with which they have, so to speak, awoken the ghosts from the past, and the fact that they are at the same time civil wars, regional wars, and international wars, with the participation of regional and extra-regional actors in a game of alliances that shows the incapacity of the European Union to become a real actor in the international arena. Let us add to that the protracted political conflict with recurrent military incidents that still confronts Israel with Palestine in their search for land and peace. And together with these conflicts, we are witnessing a proliferation of tensions that, if not remedied, can bring about new conflicts of a different nature, but real conflicts in the future. Geopolitical tensions, which are at the same time cause and consequence of a transition period when the Mediterranean, like the rest of the world, seems to be torn between an old pattern which is about to die and a new one which is already there, but the shape of which we cannot clearly see, though we already see a Europe which is more complex and more difficult to manage than 25 years ago, and a southern neighborhood where integration is still a dream, and where new actors like Russia, China, Turkey, Iran, and some Gulf countries try to fill up the void left by so to speak, a certain American disengagement. We'll see if the situation in this respect changes after the recent American election. Political and religious tensions stemming from the dashing of hopes for change and for renovation of the social contract raised by the so-called Arab Springs. These tensions are exacerbated by the growth of political Islam, including its terrorist version, in both shores of the Mediterranean, as we are sadly seeing in the last weeks. Economic tensions with mounting inequalities between North and South, and a pattern of exchanges between North and South that clearly benefits the North, and in which South-South trade is practically marginal. Demographic tensions with old societies in the North and very young and jobless societies in the South. The result of that, combined with the growing power of digital media and the networks, is an unprecedented migratory pressure which has transformed the political map and the political speech in many European countries, where xenophobia, populism, and the return of nationalism threaten the old dream of unity. Tensions about the exploitation and management of energy resources, which reflect other deeper tensions of a geopolitical nature, like the one we are living today in the Eastern Mediterranean. And last but not least, ecological tensions. The Mediterranean, as we all know, is one of the most polluted areas in the world. If we add to that the impact of climate change, the overexploitation of fisheries, and the damage to environment caused by mass tourism, we can conclude that in the short run, ecological sustainability is in serious danger in the Mediterranean. At the end of the day, we are confronted with a multifaceted, systemic crisis, which is aggravated now by the COVID-19 pandemic, with its devastating socio-economic consequences. On the one hand, the pandemic has shown that globalization is both unavoidable and weak, and has underlined the importance of neighborhood and of cooperation with neighbors. On the other, the pandemic has acted as an accelerator of geopolitical trends and challenges, both at the global and regional Mediterranean levels. With the pandemic, while the pandemic, has amplified pre-existing trends and exacerbated structural challenges, it may also offer opportunities. COVID-19 also underscores the close connection of the security and economic implications of systemic vulnerabilities. And it has highlighted the important role of civil society organizations as service providers. What can the European Union and Spain in particular do in this context I have already depicted? Well, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, or as we say in Spanish, we don't need to rediscover the Mediterranean. We already have at our disposal two very useful instruments, one at bilateral level, which is the neighborhood policy with the southern neighbors, and on the other hand, at multilateral level, the Union for the Mediterranean. As far as the European neighborhood policy for the southern neighbors is concerned, as you all know, it includes 10, now 9, because Syria is excluded for obvious circumstances, 9 partner countries: Algeria, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco, Palestine, and Tunisia. In the southern neighborhood region, the European Neighborhood Policy is implemented through bilateral cooperation programs which are tailor-made for each country and which are regional, neighborhood-wide, and cross-border programs. The European Neighborhood Policy for the southern vicinity started. Spain also had a leading role at that time. Back in 2003, started to be consolidated 2 years later in 2005, and had a last review in 2015. And this review introduced the concepts of stronger co-ownership and differentiation, plus greater flexibility and focus. It was a way to recognize the different aspirations and diversity of each partner as key pillars of this partnership. Nevertheless, it is the Spanish view that while preserving the differentiation principle, the current partnership between the European Union and the southern neighborhood should progressively develop tools for a joint management of our common opportunities and challenges, and also of our common goods, so that we can transform together our common space of coexistence. As far as the multilateral instrument at our disposal, the Union for the Mediterranean, is concerned, well, the Union for Mediterranean, as I mentioned before, was established in 2008. It is a logical evolution of the Barcelona process. It can be described as an inheritor and as the continuation of the Barcelona process by different means. As you know, the original idea, which was a French one under the presidency of Nicolas Sarkozy, the original idea was not to have on board all the members of the European Union, as had been the case in the Barcelona process, but only those geographically Mediterranean, together with the southern neighbors. At that time, it was conceived of as a way to give to Turkey an alternative to accession to the European Union. But the case is that some other European Mediterranean countries, like Spain and Italy, and other non-Mediterranean countries like Germany, disliked the idea of excluding part of the European Union from this scheme, taking into account the precedent of the Barcelona process. And finally, after a tough negotiation, diplomatic and political negotiation, the Union for the Mediterranean was established in its current shape back in 2008, the Paris summit. The focus of this new organization was to work in concrete projects closely related to the well-being of citizens as a way to create an environment which could be conducive to the solution of conflicts. But the Union for Mediterranean was never thought as an instrument to directly solve the conflicts in the region. And there were several conflicts, but there was a main one, the Israel-Palestinian conflict, which at the end of the day was the reason why the hopes raised by the Barcelona conference were not met. Well, in this context, and with these two instruments at our disposal, Spain, which has shown once again her leadership in EuroMediterranean affairs, has offered to host 2 meetings in Barcelona on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona conference. At this stage, and given the situation of the pandemic, we don't know yet if these meetings will be fully face-to-face or fully virtual, or will follow some type of hybrid format. But the idea is there. These are two meetings which are different meetings. It's not a single meeting, but the idea is to have them in a consecutive way, as we say in the diplomatic jargon these days, back to back. The first one, on the November the 26th, will cover the bilateral dimension of the Euro-Mediterranean policy, and will gather the foreign ministers of the European Union countries and those of the southern neighborhood, the list of countries I mentioned before. The main goal of this meeting is to listen to the needs and worries of our southern neighborhoods and to neighbors, and to work, or to start working together towards building a renewed partnership. We think, Spain, that to build that renewed partnership, we need a comprehensive approach in the framework, as Josep Ferrer mentioned in his introductory remarks, in the framework of the new European Commission priorities and the opportunities provided by the new multi-annual financial framework and its new single instrument for development and international cooperation. In this regard, Spain continues to urge, as we have done in the past, that sufficient European funds are devoted to the needs of the South in the framework of the European Union neighborhood policy. Such a comprehensive approach, to which I have already referred, should, in our view, cover in a coherent way economic, finance, and trade aspects, critical strategic sectors such as clean energy, digital transformation, good governance, including human rights and the rule of law, education, and mutually beneficial partnerships on migration. And also a proactive political dialogue and a promotion of regionalization, of the regional approach. As far as the second meeting is concerned, the one on the 27th of November, this will be the 5th regional forum of the Union for the Mediterranean, which brings together the foreign ministers of the now 24 members of the organizations, 24 because Syria is not an active member, like in the neighborhood, for obvious reasons, and also because the Brexit. On such an important occasion, we should go beyond the mere symbolism of the date and strive to give the Union for the Mediterranean a new impetus. That is the main goal of the meeting. To give the Union for the Mediterranean a new impetus by different means and in different ways. First, by encouraging a comprehensive dialogue among the members of the organization on the challenges that are putting at risk the goal of building that area of peace, stability, and shared prosperity in the Mediterranean, which was the declared goal of the Barcelona conference. At the end of the day, those challenges concern all of us, North and South, East and West, and we can only deal with them if we share our determination to build together the necessary answers to those challenges. Secondly, by adopting a working program for the next, let's say, 10 years in priority fields that know no borders and have, as I said before, a direct impact on the daily life of citizens, such as environment, sustainable development, blue economy, digital transition, and social inclusiveness and equality. And last but not least, because this is a necessary means to that end, by reinforcing the role of the Secretariat of the Union for the Mediterranean, and the role of the Union itself as the main catalyzer of all efforts and initiatives aiming at cooperation and integration in the Mediterranean. Let me finish by saying that we made it once back in 1995, and we can make it again in 2020, despite the different and very difficult current circumstances. I think the key to success can be enshrined in two words: diversity and unity. Diversity of facts, diversity of actors, diversity of challenges, unity of purpose. We need all on board, not only at Europe-Mediterranean level, north and south, all the members of the European Union, all the members of the southern neighborhood, but also at a Spanish level. Let's recall here that one of the main reasons for the success of the Barcelona conference in 1995 was the exemplary way in which the three administrations concerned were able to work together and to cooperate with a common goal: the municipality, the regional government, and the government of Spain. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lucini. It's very clear, very well defined the situation and where we came from and what we are looking for. I appreciate very much. I'm sure the students from different universities will have enjoyed with your presentation. Let's open now for questions. The participants attending this lecture, well, they know that they can write questions in the chat, and then, well, I will read them. But just in the meanwhile, let me ask you a question related to this scenario you were presenting. This is about what do you expect about, what are your expectations about the new North American administration, expecting that Biden will be the new president? Or do you think this is going to change the configuration in the region and will help to boost or to make stronger this process that you were announcing? How you see this, the new role of the American government in the region?
Well, that's a very good and very difficult to answer question. I think it's too early to answer in a responsible way. It is true that some kind of change vis-a-vis the positions and the attitude of the previous administration will happen, but we still have to see. Personally, I don't think that we are going to see a mimetic repetition of the Obama administration positions, but probably there will be some kind of return of the American of the United States to the complex context in the whole Mediterranean, and particularly in the Middle East. But as I say, I think it's too early to. We have not had any concrete indication yet from the still future American administration.
Thank you for your answer. I see there is a question. Well, it's not a question, just greetings from cities. So let me ask another question regarding also something that you said before. It's about the role of cities in the Mediterranean region. No? You were talking about, well, the process of the Mediterranean, the process of Barcelona and the new challenges. Do you see that at the political level some role for cities in this process beyond a lot of networks and cooperation that is now still working on? But your impression of there's a new role of cities in the new processes that you suggest?
Well, I think cities have always been there, and as you rightly said, there are very active networks of cities around the Mediterranean. But I think that precisely because of the social changes brought about by the pandemic, there will be a new role for cities, not only in the Mediterranean context, but at a global level, as far as the implication of citizens in public affairs is concerned. Yes, definitively, there will be a new role for cities in all this.
Thank you. I see there is a question, but I don't know, sorry about that, but I don't know if I see in the chat, but I am unable to. I'm sorry, because I am not an expert on that. Yeah, I see here the questions. I will read this. The person who did the question is Miguel Medina. And the question says, how can we revamp EuroMed relations and the Union for the Mediterranean in particular under the current context of deep crisis of multilateralism?
Well, I think that implicitly I answered that question in my presentation. The way to do that, as I said, the Union for the Mediterranean is not an instrument designed to solve conflicts and to ease tensions directly, but it can contribute to that end by creating an environment which is conducive to the solution of conflicts and to the easing of tensions. In this respect, my answer to that question is that we should do that through a sort of functional approach, concentrating our efforts in those priorities I mentioned, and others we can, because there are so many priorities, we have to save effort, but to identify these basic priorities, which are affecting all the countries in the region, because they are not affecting one particular or just a few countries. They have a cross-border nature. Concentrate on those issues, change really the environment through work on those issues, which at the end of the day seem technical, but have a high political dimension, because by changing circumstances in those fields, we will change the conditions of living of the citizens. And that is the basis for any kind of political transformation.
Thank you. There is another question indeed by Lourdes Vidal. I will read it. Says, concerning the Abraham Accords, do you think that the process of normalization of the relations among Arab countries and Israel will continue despite the change in the White House? And what do you think might be the consequences for the Palestinians and the Mediterranean process?
Well, I see no reason for them not to continue. But I think one of the added values the new administration can give to the prospects for peace in the Middle East is precisely to balance that process of normalization between Israel and the Arab countries with a real solution to the Palestinian question. This is a personal hope. As I said before, I don't have any kind of data to think now that the new administration will change the focus on the Middle East conflict. But my hope is that they will act in a more balanced way so that the Palestinian and interests are taken into account more than they have been taken into account by the last administration.
Thank you. In this sense, Lourdes Vidal, the same who did the other question before, is also asking to what extent the European Union still retains some leverage to revamp the idea of the two-state solution in the Palestine-Israel dispute.
Well, that's a very good question. I think that the European Union in this particular issue of the Middle East conflict or peace process, to put it on a positive note, the Union has had a leverage when the circumstances prevailing in Washington allowed for a sound division of labor between the Americans and the Europeans. When that was the case, there was some prospect for advancement, for progress in the peace process. When it has not been the case, the truth is that the role of the European Union has been practically marginal, to tell the truth.
Thank you. Well, there are short questions, but I think very interesting to spot the key issues that are related to your talk. There's another question by Elisenda Comadran Casas, and says, Biden stated during the campaign that he will keep the US embassy in Jerusalem. How do you think this will affect overall the conflict? How should Euromed countries react about the embassy in Jerusalem?
Well, we have to wait and see what is the final decision on that by the incoming administration. Jerusalem is one of the key questions of the final status. So it is not only a matter of where the embassy of one particular country or some particular countries is placed. It's a matter of solving all the questions pertaining to the Jerusalem status and the Jerusalem issue. If at the end of the day these issues can be solved, they can be perfectly compatible with the location of embassies in Jerusalem. But it's part of a more general, a broader problem.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. So we have now some questions from people who are watching this session from YouTube, and it's particularly from Laura Yushi. This is the question Laura posed. Do you think there will be the consensus to make the Union for the Mediterranean an instrument to address regional conflicts? This will involve a change in its nature or just a facilitator? She continues, the idea of facilitator was already there in the beginning of the Union of Mediterranean, in the idea of a union for projects. But projects need financial support and the economic situation has not been favorable to that. So this is the new or not new role of the European, the Union for the Mediterranean.
I will start my answer from the end. Despite the economic crisis, the Union for Mediterranean is being able to continue with very important projects, which gives a special added value to the organization in this difficult situation. On the question about the Union for the Mediterranean becoming an instrument for the solution of conflicts, well, it was never, as I said in my previous intervention, it was never thought as an instrument to that end. The Union for the Mediterranean, through emphasis in concrete projects, can contribute, and that it is in this respect that we have to work in order to reinforce the organization, can contribute to the creation of an environment of some kind of atmospherics, so to speak, that are conducive to the solution of conflicts. That's what I call the functional or functionalist approach to the Union for the Mediterranean.
Oh, thank you. There is another question from our the Zoom viewers. It's from Thomas Elliott, and this is the question. What are the main disagreements that the European political leaders have regarding to the management of the organization? I assume he refers to the Union for the Mediterranean.
Well, I couldn't say that there are basic disagreements on the management of the organization. What I would say is that there are different levels of interest in the correct functioning of the organization.
Well, thank you. It's clear the point. There's another question by Rashid Hernandez Trueba. it's about the pandemic, and this is the post-pandemic scenario. And he is asking, what will be the cross-cutting axis of the cooperation agendas of the European Union with the Mediterranean countries to collaborate in the generation of a more prosperous region? So,
I think that the main answer to that question is investment, but investment not only in infrastructures, but investment also in human development.
thank you. So I have some more questions about these policy instruments. One is from Gemma Auvarell, and she's asking regarding the near future. This is the question. Do we continue to talk about EuroMed partnership, or we will work on the basis of a more bilateral neighborhood policy? And how this external action of the EU in the region will use advantage of the inter-RegMed programs like the new NextMed to be more close to the regional and local actors?
Well, one of the main reasons why Spain proposed to host these two meetings I referred to in my presentation is precisely to underline the need for closer synergies between the bilateral aspects and the multilateral dimension of the Euro-Mediterranean policy. They are not opposite policies, they are complementary. The neighborhood policy with the southern neighbors at bilateral level, and the Union for the Mediterranean as a multilateral forum where we can discuss not only political issues, but concentrate on concrete projects in different fields, which have also a reflection in bilateral programs within the framework of the neighborhood policy with the southern neighbors.
Thank you. From the political, the public policy issues, moving now to a question more political of current politics. It's from Lourdes Vidal, and it's quite provocative. It's, what do you think about the tango between Russia and Turkey in the Mediterranean? We have seen their respective roles in Libya, in Syria, and now more recently in Nagorno-Karabakh. Is Russia there to stay? Is Erdogan rebuilding a new Ottoman Empire? How to deal with this new geopolitical disruption in our EuroMed relations? So it's more a very hot topic political issue in a way. No?
Yes, you are absolutely right. It's a very interesting question. Well, one of the main features of the new geopolitical situation in and around the Mediterranean is the presence of actors which were not in the same way present in the past, and that's clearly the case of both Russia and Turkey. This is a fact of life. We have to live with it. We have to try to cooperate when cooperation is possible, and to defend our positions when other actors act counter our interests and our principles. That would be my answer to that certainly interesting question.
Thank you for your answer. There is another question more on the institutional side of the organization of the Euro-Mediterranean politics. No? It's by Sohair Hayran, and he is asking, do you think that there is a lack of coordination between the work and responsibilities between the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, based in Naples, and the Union for Mediterranean, based in Barcelona? How they are interrelated, and how do you think that there is no head offices based in the South Mediterranean countries?
Sorry, I didn't understand the last part of the question.
Yeah, it's about why there are no offices or headquarters of these international organizations in the southern Mediterranean countries, only in Naples or in Barcelona that are in the north part. This is what I understand from the question.
Well, if I understand correctly, the answer to the question could be that, well, the interaction between the delegations or the embassies now of the European Union in the southern countries and the local governments provide for the right venue for this kind of dialogue. So we don't need physical premises of the Union for the Mediterranean in the southern countries. It's a day-to-day cooperation, business-like cooperation through our European delegations in those countries.
Thank you. Well, there is another question by Anonymous. There's no name, but I think the question is interesting to raise. It's well, he says there are a lot of challenges ahead. A new president in the USA, COVID-19, a frustration that started since 2010 with the Arab Spring, tension in the eastern part of Europe with a more present Russia. Well, all these issues we already discussed. The Middle East processus that shows no positive sign to move forward, tension in the Mediterranean, Greece, Turkey. Do you think that, and this is the question, do you think that in this context, Euro-Mediterranean partnership can reinforce cooperation? And to what extent the new EMP can reinforce this process?
Well, we as Spain, we are fully convinced that it can reinforce cooperation. And that's why we are working to that end. And that's why we propose to have these meetings in order to relaunch both dimensions of the Euro-Mediterranean policy. Yeah. Now it's a matter of political will. We are all on board the same boat. But the past has shown that some partners have more political will than others, but part of our work is to try to convince the others that this is not just a matter of option. It's a real need for all of us to deepen cooperation between both shores of the Mediterranean.
Thanks. And also following what was said before about the Arab Springs, there is a question from Miguel Medina about your view 10 years after about the Arab Springs. No? Do you think there has been a long-lasting impact to the MENA societies, if any, and is going to have an impact on these processes?
Well, I think that the so-called Arab Springs let the genius out of the bottle. And now it is very difficult to send the genius back to the bottle, which means that nothing will be the same after the Arab Springs. The truth is that the expectations raised by the Arab Springs have not been met. And that explains part of the social and political tensions we are witnessing now in some countries. On the other hand, this is a very personal opinion, but I think that generally speaking, we in Europe and in the rest of the Western world, so to speak, we were a bit naive when confronting the Arab Springs. There was a general impression that the miracle of democracy was going to happen in some countries overnight, which has not been the case and could not be the case, because well, democracy is something which is very long and hard to build and very easy to destroy when forces decide to destroy democracy. But I think that there is a real cut in time between before and after 2011, and many of the things we are seeing now come from the frustration of the expectations raised by the Arab Springs.
Thank you. So we are we are going to conclude maybe a couple of questions to finish this session. But I have among the questions that arrived just a few moments ago. There is one about the situation of refugees in the region, no? And the question posed by Maria Eugenia Marin says, in the midst of the pandemic and how this has especially affected refugees, do you think there will be a change in the policies of the region in terms of a more cooperative position towards the issue of refugees?
Not only refugees, but migration in general. Well, it is obvious that migration is a structural fact. It is nothing new, but what is new is the level of pressure we are seeing now because of different factors, which have a lot to do with economic, social and economic circumstances in many African countries. I think that we have to work towards, and that's part of the Spanish position on the renewal of the European neighborhood policy with the southern partners. We have to work, as I said, to have mutually beneficial migration arrangements, which should also cover the particular problems of refugees. Yeah, no doubt.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions, the last questions. One is very specific, but I think it has interest. It's about from Laura Huisi from the YouTube chat. The question says, has Spain reacted to the initiative of Arab Emirates of opening a consulate in Al Ayoun?
Frankly speaking, I am not aware of that. I cannot answer that question because I don't deal with those issues and I have not followed it.
Okay, thank you. And the last question is about is by Batul Benjamina, and he says, usually informal and technical frameworks 5+5 and Union for the Mediterranean respectively have better outcomes than the formal ones such as Barcelona process or the ENP. Which framework is preferred by Spain and why?
Well, I think that these are different frameworks and they are not incompatible between them. What we need is to create positive synergies between all the different frameworks. And in that respect, one of the main roles of the Union for the Mediterranean can be, as I said, to serve as a catalyzer for of all different initiatives and efforts aimed at having a greater degree of cooperation and integration in the Mediterranean area.
Well, okay. Thank you very much. We are going to conclude here this event. I think it has been very interesting. We learned a lot and also have a clear understanding about the position and the initiative of the Spanish government regarding this 25th anniversary and the strategies that are going to be pursued. And also thank you very much, Mr. Lucini, for also having your kindness to answer all the questions that were placed in different directions and sometimes maybe different overlapping, but I think all are interesting and all have contributing to some different angles to the issue we were discussing today. So thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much to all the participants, people who are attending, the people who did the questions, and also, of course, to IEMed for organizing this session.
Thanks to you and thanks to all participants for their patience and for their answers, their questions. All of them were very interesting questions. I hope the answers were at least a bit interesting. Thank you very much. And thanks again to the organizers of this event.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.